In a comfortable, private room at the hospital, an elderly man with gray hair lay beneath and for drip, clearly in pain. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and his daughter, Alicia, stepped in. She appeared to be in her mid-30s, with an attractive appearance and figure. Despite her fashionable attire and well-groomed appearance, her red eyes betrayed her exhaustion and sleepless nights. Placing a bag by the bedside, she perched herself on the edge of the bed, kissed her father on the cheek, and asked, "Good morning, Dad. How are you feeling today? I'm worried sick about you. You've been battling this illness for so long, and now stomach issues on top of it. I spoke with the doctor yesterday about your health, and he said you need to eat right and stick to a diet. So I brought everything on the list: oatmeal cooked in water and steamed vegetables. Meat is off the menu for now." Seeing his daughter, the man felt a sudden relief from his pain. "Thank you for caring, my dear. You're the only one left for me. I don't have much of an appetite yet, but maybe I'll eat later what you brought. I'll rest up a bit here in the hospital and then get back to business. Tell me, how are things at the bank? What's Harvey saying? Did he seal the deal as I instructed? How are you holding up?" "Don't worry. Harvey's always tied up with work. He's hardly ever home, always busy with reports and business meetings. He's not pleased that you haven't officially made him the bank's director yet. He doesn't like being the boss, just by proxy. I'm swamped with work too. I'll be heading out on a business trip in a couple of weeks to negotiate tomograph supplies. Everything's fine, Dad. As long as you recover quickly, everything will be all right." Alicia reassured him. Bruce stroked his daughter's hand and said, "Don't worry about Harvey rushing things. I can still work independently. He already runs the company entirely. When the time comes, he'll be the director. But it's not good that you two hardly see each other. What if I die soon, and I still don't have any grandchildren? You should hurry with that matter. After all, you're not a young girl anymore. After Annie's death, I raised you and lived solely for you. I was so happy to have you. A child is a lifelong gift from fate." Alicia didn't like these discussions about children. She herself knew that it was high time for her to have a child, but it wasn't as simple as that. So she quickly changed the subject and persuaded her father to eat a few spoonfuls of porridge before rushing off to work. On her way to work, she reminisced about her childhood, her youth, their relationship with Harvey, and tried to understand why they had become such strangers to each other lately. Alicia's father was a well-known bank owner in the city, and he raised her alone. Her mother passed away very early, when she was only 3 years old. She hardly remembered her, except for often gazing at the huge portrait in her father's bedroom and imagining what kind of woman she was, how much she loved her. Her father never remarried, and Alicia was very grateful for that. She didn't want to see another woman in the house, let alone call her mother. Her father had a personal life, of course, but he never dared to remarry. As he sometimes confessed, he couldn't find a woman like his Annie. He loved his wife very much and cherished her memory, so even after all these years, her bedroom remained untouched in their home. The housekeepers were not allowed to enter there, so either her father or Alicia cleaned it themselves. Everything remained as it was when her mother was alive. Her robe hung on a chair, and sometimes it seemed like she had just stepped out for a minute. Her favorite perfume and cosmetics stood on the nightstand. Her father often went there and sat for a long time in that room, sighing heavily, reminiscing about how happy they were with Annie. Alicia excelled in her studies, delighting her father with her achievements, and graduated from university with honors. Since childhood, she had entrepreneurial abilities, so even in high school, she managed to earn some money by doing classmates' homework or providing cheat sheets for exams. Despite having all the means to spoil her, her father tried not to, as he believed it was important for Alicia to learn to achieve things on her own and, of course, to find a successful marriage. Bruce tried several times to invite potential suitors and their parents for dinner at their home, those whom he himself would like to see as Alicia's husband. But Alicia wasn't interested in such arrangements and deliberately ruined the evenings. Then, leaving the house, she read many romance novels and sincerely believed that she would feel it when she met the man destined for her. After finishing university, with the help of her father's connections, Alicia started her own small business, selling medical equipment and providing installation services. She often traveled for work, and it was in a small resort town where she met her future husband, Harvey. He wasn't a wealthy man. He worked as a simple manager in a private clinic where she delivered ultrasound machines. He constantly complimented her and confidently courted her, as if he knew for sure that Alicia would agree to date him. He managed to impress her without spending a lot of money. He arranged a fantastic picnic in the countryside and then took her for a ride on a motorboat along the river. Their interaction was so romantic that Alicia fell in love with Harvey. The groom readily agreed to move, especially since Alicia already had an apartment, the purchase of which her father had helped with. Soon, Harvey met Alicia's father. Bruce found Harvey to be a good, humble, and intelligent young man, so he decided to gradually teach him about his business and banking affairs, with the intention of eventually handing over the entire company to him. Who could refuse such a prospect? Harvey was happy and initially very grateful to Bruce for his new, comfortable life. He also didn't slack in his work. He always put in effort and achieved success. The young couple had a splendid wedding attended by the press and photographers. Harvey proudly embraced his bride around the waist, not wanting to let her go. Alicia was overjoyed. Everything was just as she had dreamed. She loved Harvey deeply, and he constantly cared for her. Everything was perfect in the first years of their marriage. Harvey was heavily involved in Alicia's father's business, learning leadership skills from him. Of course, he didn't forget about his wife. They often went on vacations together, and he rushed home from work to be with his beloved wife. After all, thanks to her, he had a job and a home. But as it is known, people quickly get used to everything, and after 5 years, Harvey began to change. He felt like things had always been this way and always would be. The passion between the spouses faded away. They were both busy individuals, and their entire day was scheduled by the minute. When they met late in the evening, they discussed work over dinner. Neither of them had used affectionate terms for each other in a long time. Initially, Alicia herself didn't want children. She thought there was no rush and used contraception with her husband until she turned 30. But then she started to wonder, what were they living together for? They were constantly working and earning money. All their acquaintances already had children, and Alicia decided that she and Harvey also needed a child. But it turned out to be not so simple. In recent years, Alicia's father had been severely ill, his condition slowly deteriorating with painful joints limiting his movements. Periodically, he underwent treatment in the hospital, which temporarily improved his condition. It was during this time that Alicia became pregnant, but due to intense stress and anxiety, she suffered a miscarriage. The pregnancy was in its early stages, and the couple decided it wasn't a significant loss. However, after this incident, Alicia couldn't conceive again, which deeply upset her, and their relationship with her husband had become very complex lately. It seemed to her that they hardly communicated with each other anymore. Her husband constantly complained about how much longer he needed to work under her father's proxy, longing to become the bank's full-fledged director. Moreover, her father's condition kept worsening, with all his chronic illnesses exacerbating. Alicia had heard from others multiple times that Harvey was cheating on her. Sometimes even the accountant and secretary mentioned it, but she didn't believe it. She hadn't seen any signs of infidelity from her husband herself, and just because their relationship had deteriorated didn't necessarily mean he was involved with another woman. Every family goes through crisis periods, and they just needed to get through it. That evening, she came home much later than her husband because she had a lot of work at the office. Harvey tried to fry eggs, but nearly burnt the pan, threw it into the sink, and yelled, "Alicia, where have you been? Your loving husband came home from work hungry, and there's no food in the fridge. Are you just going to keep working like this? I'm tired of it. Maybe you should take care of the house instead of spending days in your office." Feeling offended, Alicia opened the window to let out the smoke, waved a towel to dissipate it, and began to protest. "Good evening to you too. You're not a little child anymore, and it's not my fault you can't even cook yourself eggs without causing a fire. You could have ordered dinner at a restaurant. There is food in the fridge, soup, cutlets. You just needed to heat them up. And don't blame me for working a lot. I love my job, and I will keep working there. You're not home all day either. So, am I supposed to sit alone in the apartment? If anything needs to change in our lives, it should change for both of us. Did you even bother to ask me how my day went? How my dad is feeling? I'll make you dinner now. Just wait half an hour." She became upset and started chopping vegetables for the salad and reheating the cutlets. Her husband sat at the table and began talking to her. "I'm sorry, Alicia. I was wrong. It's just that I had a tough day at work. I was completely exhausted, and then I forgot to pour oil into the pan, and everything started burning. I couldn't control my emotions. How is Bruce feeling? Did you visit him in the hospital today? What did the doctors say about his condition? Let me help you with something." Alicia didn't stay angry for long. She kissed her husband and replied, "No, I'll do it myself. I'll cook dinner instead. Why don't you open the wine? Let's have a drink. We both need to relax. It's a challenging time for us. Dad's condition hardly improves despite the doctors doing everything they can. He's lost 10 kilograms with all these diets. And then I need to go on a business trip. There's a very lucrative deal to be closed. But I don't know what to do about Dad. You're always at the bank. And Dad needs someone there every day. He needs attention, you know." Harvey immediately brightened up. His mood improved, and he tried to reassure his wife. "Why do you think so poorly of me? If you need to go on a business trip, then go and don't worry about anything. I'll visit your dad in the hospital every day and support him. Everything will be fine, darling. I'm right here with you." They enjoyed their delicious dinner and watched a romantic movie. However, Alicia still worried. She had known Harvey for many years and noticed how delighted he was with her business trip, probably not for no reason, but she needed to go. She informed her dad that she was leaving for a short business trip. In her presence, her father tried to be cheerful, not wanting to upset his child, but in reality, he was suffering from terrible pains. Moreover, his heart ached, and sometimes it was difficult for him to breathe. Alicia was a skilled driver and had been confidently driving for many years, so she wasn't afraid to travel long distances alone. This route was familiar to her, and she had driven it many times before, always bypassing the usual traffic jam through the small town. However, today the weather had taken a turn for the worse. It was pouring rain outside with a biting cold wind, and the road in the small town had turned into mud. As she approached another bump, her car was suddenly thrown to the edge of the road. There was a dull thud as it hit something solid, and the tire pressure sensor squealed sharply. "Unlucky me. Looks like I've punctured a tire. Just what I needed. And I don't even have a spare tire. I took it out recently when I was carrying equipment and forgot to put it back. According to the GPS, it's several miles to the small town, and there's no one around," Alicia exclaimed. She put on the hood of her coat and got out of the car. After inspecting the vehicle, she realized that indeed the tire was flat and the rim was bent. She looked ahead, trying to make out any buildings or lights through the rain, but there was nothing visible. Alicia tried to call for a tow truck, but the mobile network was very poor, and no one could hear her words. She sat in the car for a long time, not knowing what to do, and it was already getting dark outside. Then, finally, she heard the sound of an engine. A tractor was coming down the road. She jumped out of the car and started waving her hands, trying to get the driver's attention, praying that he would notice her and stop. Finally, the tractor slowed down, and a young guy climbed out of the cabin. "Good evening. What's happened? Is there something wrong with your car?" he asked. "Hello. Yes, I have a problem with the tire. I don't have a spare tire in the car, and I can't reach anyone by phone. I can't even get a tow truck. What should I do? I'm afraid to stay here overnight," Alicia replied, looking distressed. The guy carefully inspected the damage to the tire and said, "Yes, the tire needs to be replaced. Do you see that fence not far from you? Next to it is a garage where they store fertilizers, and there's security there. Let's leave your car there, and in the morning, I'll go to the tire shop and ask the guys to help fix the tire, and you hop into the cab of the tractor." Hearing this offer, the rain-drenched woman started to worry and fear the man. "Don't be afraid of me. I'm Troy. Everyone knows me here. I'll take you to the small town to old Lady Erin, and you can spend the night there. She's my neighbor, a very nice, kind woman who never refuses to help," the guy reassured her. So Alicia didn't know how to thank this helpful guy and said, "Thank you, Troy. My name is Alicia. I got very upset being alone here. Maybe in the small town, I'll be able to get through to the towing service, and I'll pay for staying at this woman's place. I'm just very scared to spend the night alone on the road. It's the first time such a situation has happened to me. The guy drove her to a small house, knocked on the window, and explained the situation to the slightly deaf old woman. She nodded in agreement and gestured for Alicia to come inside. Come in and don't worry about my dog Betty. She's as old as I am and doesn't bite. Oh, you're completely soaked from the rain. Let me give you a warm robe. Go change, and we'll hang your things to dry while you sleep, Aaron said. Alicia thanked Aaron and went to change in the small bedroom. There, sleeping in the bed, was a toddler about 3 years old. He coughed heavily in his sleep and breathed through his mouth all the time because his nose was stuffy. It was clear to the naked eye that the child was sick. Worriedly, Alicia asked Aaron, "Is this your grandson? The boy coughs a lot. He has a fever." I touched his forehead. "He's very hot. Did you call a doctor? How are you treating the child?" The old woman sighed heavily and said, "Where would we get a doctor in our small town? The medical station is under repair, and I understand myself that Zachary needs to be taken to the city hospital. But I'm already 80 years old. I can hardly walk myself. I'm not sure if I can take him there. I'm constantly crying and praying for my grandson's health, and I also brew various herbs for him." "And where are Zachary's parents? Why are you raising him all alone? Don't they care about what's happening with their son?" Alicia asked in surprise. The old woman became very upset and replied, "It's a long story, but I can tell you if you want. And while you do, have some corn porridge. It's just ready. My Bill and I lived our whole lives understanding and loving each other. We always worked on the farm, but we didn't have children. At first, we waited a long time for a child, and then we stopped hoping. But when we were around 50 years old, our daughter was born. All the locals thought we were crazy to have a child at such an age. They couldn't understand what it's like to wait and pray for a child your whole life. But we couldn't give up on her. So we took the risk and, ignoring everyone, had our daughter. Everything would have been fine, but Dina had a weak heart from childhood. Maybe because I had her so late, or for some other reason. My husband, Bill, passed away early when Dina was just 5 years old, so I raised her myself. I loved her very much, took care of her, and didn't make her work too hard. After school, Dina moved to the city to find work. She didn't want to stay in the small town because there were no prospects here. She got a job as a waitress in a cafe, often called me, and said everything was fine and that she had found a fiancé here. I warned my daughter that he was much older than her, but she assured me they truly loved each other. I even rejoiced, thinking that if he was older, he must be a responsible man. I was looking forward to Dina inviting me to her wedding soon. But 3 years later, my daughter came back to me, but already pregnant. She fell at my feet, crying, and said her fiancé had left her. He turned out to be a married man, and when he found out Dina was pregnant, he forced her to have an abortion and then cut off contact with her. She couldn't bring herself to kill that baby. Of course, I forgave her. She's my daughter. But Dina couldn't survive the childbirth and died. Her heart gave out. I cried and grieved so much for her death, and they wanted to take my grandson to an orphanage. The Child Protection Service thought I was too old, but I managed to keep Zachary with me. I'm raising him all alone, but with each passing year, it's getting harder for me to do it because I can hardly walk myself now. I have high blood pressure, joint pain, and now I've become a little deaf and have terrible eyesight. I understand that I won't be able to raise my grandson, and I'll die very soon. And it hurts me even more because the Child Protection Service will definitely send the boy to an orphanage, and living in an orphanage is very hard. I feel so sorry for him, but I have no strength. Tomorrow, I'll ask Troy, my neighbor, to take my grandson to the hospital by bus because he's been sick for a long, long time. Alicia wiped away the tears that welled up as the story of this poor old woman deeply touched her, and she felt very sorry for the little boy. She decided to offer her help and said, "You don't need to ask anyone for anything. Tomorrow, Troy will fix the tire on my car, and I'll personally take you and your grandson to the hospital. I work at the clinic and know all the doctors. I'll take you to the best pediatrician. The child will definitely get help there, and I'll cancel my business trip because human life is more important." The old woman even started crying, wiping her tears with the edge of her handkerchief, and thanked the woman. "Thank you. It's hard to find such compassionate people nowadays. I'll pray for you." Look at how beautiful Dina was, just like her father. She had thick black hair and big eyes. All the men in our little town admired her. I couldn't protect my daughter. I miss her so much. Alicia looked at the photo in the frame and was surprised. There was indeed a photo of a very beautiful young dark-haired girl. She was happy, and next to her was Harvey, Alicia's husband. She couldn't be mistaken. "And who is this next to your daughter in the photo?" Alicia asked. "That's the same man, her fiancé, who asked her to have an abortion. That's Zachary's father. At first, I wanted to cut him out of the photo, but then I didn't. I thought that when I die, maybe my grandson will want to find his father," the old woman replied. Alicia found it hard to breathe. She apologized and went outside. She exposed her face to the pouring rain and wiped her cheeks. She couldn't believe it. So Zachary is Harvey's son, and Harvey has been cheating on her for a long time. So people were right to warn her about her husband's affairs, and she, like a fool, didn't believe them. Poor boy. He faces a very difficult life. His grandmother is already very old, and he has no one else. His biological father doesn't care about him at all, so the boy will end up in an orphanage. No, this shouldn't happen. The woman made a decision instantly. Alicia went back into the house, sat down next to the old woman, took her dry, wrinkled hand, placed it on her own, and began to speak. "Aaron, what I'm about to tell you may be hard to believe, but please try to. That man in the picture is not only your late daughter's fiancé, but also my husband. It's hard for me to realize it myself, but it's true. We've been living together with him for many years. I can't believe that Harvey could be so cruel to your daughter, deceiving and cheating on me all this time. Maybe I ended up in your house for a reason, you know. So, it turns out that Zachary is not a stranger to me. He's the son of my irresponsible husband, and I won't abandon him or leave him in trouble. I'll help your grandson get better, and I want to adopt him. Would you mind? I have a job, my own apartment, and my father owns a bank. The child won't lack anything." The elderly woman looked at her in astonishment, as if she were a crazy woman, and quietly said, "O Lord, forgive us, my daughter and me. Do you really want to adopt the son of your husband's mistress? It's hard to believe. And how will your husband react to this? If he abandoned my pregnant daughter and didn't want her to have the baby, he's unlikely to change his attitude towards Zachary now. I fear for my grandson." Alicia emotionally replied, "That doesn't matter. I've already made up my mind. I'll divorce my husband and raise Zachary myself. I'll raise him, love him like my own son, and I won't leave you here alone. I've dreamed of having a child for years, but I couldn't conceive, and now I can be a mother to Zachary. Please consider my offer, and for now, let's sleep. I'm very tired." The next day, Troy helped fix the car wheel, and Alicia drove Zachary and Aaron to the clinic. The little boy was weak. He refused to eat and slept throughout the journey. He somehow immediately warmed up to Alicia, as if he had known her for a long time, and she carefully observed him. He looked so much like Harvey, with the same gaze, sharp nose, sandy hair, and even the same ear shape. Unable to contain herself, while Aaron gathered documents and belongings and called her husband, as the signal was better in the small town than on the road, Alicia reflected on how similar the boy looked to Harvey. Meanwhile, after his wife left, Harvey immediately indulged himself. He was in bed with yet another young woman, whispering sweet words in her ear and gently kissing her neck when the phone rang. Seeing it was his wife calling, Harvey gently pushed away his lover and answered the call. "Good morning, dear. Husband, my plans have changed. The business trip got canceled. It's a long story, but I'm taking a little boy and his grandmother to the city for treatment. This kid is so adorable. He's all alone. His mother died during childbirth, and his father abandoned him even before he was born. His grandmother is already 80 years old, and she can't raise him alone. So I was thinking, what if we adopt him together? Let's give Zachary a happy childhood. My heart aches for him." Harvey was shocked. His romantic mood vanished, and he shouted into the phone. Alicia, are you out of your mind? Are you okay upstairs? I'm absolutely against this. And I'm not going to raise someone else's child. Don't do this, or we're done as a family. Alicia intentionally didn't tell him the whole truth. She wanted to hear what he would say, and realized that there was nothing left to tie her to this man. He didn't need his own children, let alone someone else's. Alicia exhaled and confidently replied, Suit yourself. If you don't need a family, then so be it. I won't change my decision. I'll take the kid to the hospital, come back home, and then we'll talk. Harvey threw his phone on the floor and yelled at his lover. Well, why are you lying there? Hurry up, get dressed, and get out of here. You're all getting on my nerves. The offended girl left the apartment, cursing her rude lover, but Harvey didn't care. He was already dialing the number of a locksmith from the advertisement. I need to change the locks on the doors urgently. Write down the address. If you do everything quickly, I'll pay you twice the usual price. He decided not to let Alicia into the apartment with someone else's child. He was so angry that he decided to divorce and take it to court. Just wait, foolish woman. You don't even know who I am. Look at her. Insane thinking. She can just bring some little boy here along with an old grandmother. She probably thinks it'll all work out so easily for her. Did I work for her father's company for so many years in vain? I'm practically the bank's director. Her father will die soon, and he won't be able to stop me. You'll regret this decision, Alicia. The woman decided not to tell Aaron about the unpleasant conversation with her husband for now. First, they needed to arrange treatment for the boy, so they went straight to the clinic. As it turned out, they arrived at the hospital just in time. Zachary had a severe case of bronchitis, and pneumonia could develop soon if left untreated. The boy was hospitalized, and his grandmother stayed with him. Alicia bought them medicine and food, hugged Zachary and Aaron, and said, Everything will be fine. Professional doctors are working here, and you'll be able to take a break from the heavy housework for a bit. I'll come by tomorrow. But for now, I need to go home and have a serious talk with my husband. I'm sorry, Alicia. It seems that because of Zachary and me, you'll soon lose your family. I hope you understand that it's not my fault, Aaron said. Alicia sighed heavily and replied, You really haven't done anything wrong. It's not your fault that my husband turned out to be such a despicable person. It turns out I've been living for so many years with a deceitful egoist, and I didn't want to notice anything. Everything will be fine now. I'm here for you, and I won't abandon you. She kissed the boy on the cheek and drove back home. She wanted to take a shower, change clothes, and have an honest conversation with Harvey. But to her surprise, the key couldn't open the door lock. She looked closer and realized that her husband had already changed the locks. She started calling him on his mobile phone, but he deliberately didn't answer. Alicia decided to go outside and dial the apartment number on the intercom. Her husband answered immediately. I know it's you, Alicia. Don't try to break in. I won't allow you to enter the apartment with someone else's child. Take the boy back home to the small town, and we'll forget all about this. I could never raise someone else's child. Remember that, and think carefully whether this child is worth all the trouble waiting for you. You don't know everything yet. This is your biological son. You had a relationship with Dina, remember? Well, you stopped talking to her when she got pregnant with your child, and she died in childbirth. Now her elderly mother is raising this boy all alone. Zachary is your biological son. Are you really so despicable that you won't change your mind even now? Alicia shouted. Harvey, you fell silent as everything I said was true about your relationship with Dina and her pregnancy. But you didn't know she had died, and you didn't want this son. Nevertheless, you started speaking differently. Alicia, I'm opening the door. Let's talk calmly. It was just a fleeting relationship. That girl meant nothing to me, and I didn't ask her to have the baby. I even gave her money for an abortion, so I don't need this child, understand me? It changes nothing. Why do you need him? Any woman in your place would hate this boy. After all, he's the son of my mistress. Why do you need him? Are you so bored with life? Especially since your father will die soon anyway. Don't do anything foolish. Take the boy back to the small town and come back, and everything will be as it was before. What a vile person you are, Harvey. I hate you. Specifically not this poor boy and his deceased mother. Get out of my apartment, or I'll come with the police and break the door down. We're getting divorced, and that's final. You have 24 hours to gather your things and leave. My goodness, how could I have lived with such a terrible person? She walked slowly to her car, barely having any strength left, feeling like screaming from pain. She couldn't understand how she hadn't noticed anything before. What a foolish woman she had been. Alicia wiped the tears from her face, drank some water, took a deep breath, and said quietly, I need to calm down and go to the hospital to see Dad. Only he can understand me in this situation. She drove to the hospital with many thoughts swirling in her head. How do I go on living? Everything that surrounded me before turned out to be deceit. I don't know where to start a new life without Harvey. The doctor informed Alicia that her father's condition had worsened. He now had additional problems with his heart and kidneys and had been transferred to the ICU. Alicia was frightened and ran to the ICU. They didn't want to let her in, but she managed to persuade the hospital staff and entered the ward. She saw her father lying helplessly on the bed, various tubes protruding from him, sensors beeping nearby, and his eyes closed. The woman sat down next to her father, stroked his head and his cheek, and whispered, Dad, how could this happen? I thought you were feeling a little better when I left. Everything will be fine. You'll definitely get better. I love you so much. Please don't give up. The man opened his eyes, saw his daughter, smiled faintly, and said softly in a parched voice, I've been waiting for you, my daughter. I was afraid I wouldn't have time to tell you the most important thing. I love you too. Maybe it's my time to die, and soon I'll see my Annie. She's waiting for me there, I know. And you, be a strong woman. You and Harvey will handle all the difficulties together, I'm sure. Just don't forget that you can still have children. It's a pity, but I probably won't live to see them. Alicia didn't understand anything. She kissed her father's hands and whispered, No, Dad, you don't know everything yet. I'm divorcing my husband, and I want to adopt a baby. It's Harvey's son, whom he abandoned long ago, and the baby is completely alone and unwanted now. I never thought my husband was such a terrible person, capable of lying and cheating on me. It hurts me so much. Dad, I need you. I believe you'll get better. I can't lose you. Bruce said anxiously, So that's the kind of person Harvey turns out to be. I'll call a notary to the hospital tomorrow and write a will, leaving everything to you. As for adopting the child, you must decide for yourself. I'm sure you'll do the right thing. Don't worry, daughter. We'll handle everything together. Don't be upset. Go home and rest. I'll also get some sleep. I've been constantly tired lately. Alicia left the hospital, hoping that her father would definitely recover, now that he wouldn't leave her as always, and that everything would be fine. But in the morning, she received a call from the hospital informing her that her father had died during the night. The woman grieved heavily for her father. She struggled to organize the funeral and memorial service. Alicia listened to condolences from acquaintances and constantly looked at people, hoping to see Harvey. But her husband didn't show up at Bruce's funeral, even though she had informed him about it. It was strange, considering they had lived together for many years, and it was her father who was responsible for Harvey's career achievements. Alicia didn't forget about Aaron and Zachary. She visited them in the hospital, and after their discharge, she took them to her father's house, persuading them to stay with her a little longer. But lately, she had so many problems that she couldn't make any decisions. A month later, Alicia was able to calm down a little after her father's death. Aaron comforted her as best she could, and Zachary kept her from feeling lonely. The woman grew very attached to the baby, and it was caring for him that prevented her from doing nothing and distracted her from negative thoughts. Alicia decided it was time to divorce her husband and file for adoption of Zachary. There were no issues with the adoption, since his mother had passed away, and his grandmother couldn't be his guardian due to her age. Alicia had her own home and job, so the adoption was quickly approved. However, she faced difficulties with the divorce. It turned out her resourceful husband had emptied all the bank accounts, transferred the money to his overseas accounts, and even the joint account with his wife had been drained. After the grueling divorce, Alicia was left only with her father's house, the apartment, and her modest business, which was her sole source of income. Harvey took everything else, hiring a good lawyer after her father's death. Being in his house was unbearably painful for Alicia, as everything reminded her of her dear father, and she cried constantly. In the apartment she had lived for many years, with a husband who had deceived her, she didn't know what to do or where she could find peace. That's when wise Aaron suggested, "Alicia, I see how much you're suffering, and I don't like living in the city either. I'm not used to city life. I still have a small farm and my dog, Betty, back in our small town. I asked Troy to look after everything, but I really want to go back home. I suggest you come with us to the small town. Our house with my grandson is small, but we can all fit there. We have a forest nearby, nature, and in the summer we can pick berries and mushrooms. I'm sure you'll feel better in such surroundings. You can stay there for a while, and then decide what to do next in your life. Plus, Zachary loves running around the yard, especially with the dog." Alicia liked this proposal, and she decided to move. At first, everyone thought she was being very foolish, especially her colleagues at the clinic where she worked. After all, she divorced a banker husband, left a luxurious father's house, and decided to move to a small town, and even adopted her husband's child from his mistress. But Alicia paid no attention to these talks. She just wanted to find peace and figure out what to do next. She started working remotely, managing paperwork for the clinic. After all, it wouldn't be feasible to commute from a small town to other clinics every day. And Zachary needed attention. The boy was lively and agile, so he always needed supervision. At first, life in the small town seemed unbearably difficult for Alicia. Erin was a patient woman and taught Alicia everything as if they were the same age. Zachary and Troy often dropped by, only laughing. He couldn't believe that a city girl could live in a small town. He was sure she'd run back to the city within a month. But, as it turned out, Alicia really impressed him. Even back then, on the deserted road at night when her car broke down, and he immediately fell for her. He knew they were very different people. He was a simple guy from a small town, and she was the daughter of a bank owner. Plus, there was an age difference, with him being 5 years younger than Alicia. So, he wasn't planning on confessing his feelings to her yet. Instead, he tried to spend more time with her. He took her to the forest, to the river, and often played with Zachary, which brought them closer together. They talked a lot, and Alicia noticed that Troy was not just an ordinary guy. He was a real man who was ready to defend his small town. She noticed this when he argued with a local farmer who was trying to persuade the locals to sell their land for the construction of new houses. He talked about the future modern cottages that would be built there and how there would be many tourists, and all the residents of the small town would be offered comfortable apartments in exchange for their homes. Well, that's good, isn't it? There are many pensioners in the small town. It'll be easier for them to live in an apartment. Why are you against it? Alicia asked Troy. Troy waved his hands and said, "You just don't understand, do you? These are sacred lands here. Nature remains untouched by human hands. But if everything gets dug up now and cottages are built, asphalt is laid, what will happen? It'll be just another town with numerous houses. Many people come here and say that even the air here is healing. We can't ruin it all." How long did Erin manage to live in the city? Was it good for her there? Our pensioners are alive because they live on their land, take care of their homes and gardens. Can they live in apartments? And this farmer is a cunning man. He wants to deceive the pensioners, buy their land for a pittance, and then resell it to the developer 3 times more expensive, not caring at all about the fate of the residents. I'll do everything to prevent this from happening. If necessary, I'll even involve the press. Don't you have such connections in the city? I'm sure this farmer will get scared and change his mind. Alicia pondered over the guy's words and replied, "You're right. I came here myself in a bad state. I couldn't calm down from my husband's betrayal, divorce, and father's death. And here I didn't even notice how I started feeling better. I stopped thinking about the bad, and now I want to live again. I'll help you. I'll call a journalist I know who loves sensations. We'll make this farmer famous." Alicia and Troy succeeded. The film crew seriously frightened the farmer with their report, and he promised to stop buying land and persuading local residents to sell their homes in exchange for not airing the footage. Troy was pleased. They shook hands with the journalist and parted ways. But a week later, Troy disappeared without a trace. He didn't show up for work. He wasn't at home. Aaron and Alicia immediately started worrying about him. All the local residents searched for Troy, but they couldn't find him anywhere. Even the locals broke the lock on his house and saw that his things weren't stolen. There was even soup in the pot on the stove, which meant he wasn't planning to leave. Alicia was worried because she had grown so attached to him. She saw how he constantly looked at her, and she understood that he had fallen in love with her. But she couldn't admit to herself that she liked him too. Only now, when Troy disappeared, did she realize how much she missed him, how worried she was, and how much she missed him. Now the little son kept asking when Troy would come to them, and Aaron quietly cried, suspecting something bad. But a couple of weeks later, locals began talking about something terrible happening in their small town. Marissa, Aaron's neighbor, rushed to Aaron's house and shouted, "Alicia, Aaron, have you heard what happened? A ghost has appeared in our small town. See that black smoke? That's the ghost avenging Troy's death. It's the second combine harvester that's on fire. What's happening here?" Aaron crossed herself, shook her head, and said, "Could it be that ghost again, Marissa? Remember about 30 years ago? Young guys were dying in the forest in our small town, and nobody could find them. And now something bad is happening again." The neighbors discussed for a long time who it could be, but Alicia had her own opinion. She decided not to voice it yet. Of course, she didn't believe in ghosts, but she had hope. What if it's Troy seeking revenge? What if he's alive and hiding in the forest? He couldn't have just disappeared like that. He often said he wanted his family and loved Zachary very much. We need to find him, but I don't know this area at all. Where should I go? As my late father used to say, we must trust our instincts. But Alicia also decided to approach the gamekeeper, Ron, with her suspicions. She immediately told him everything and begged, "Help me find Troy. I don't believe he could have gone anywhere or died in the forest. Why would he do that? He loved life very much and had plans for the future. I'm sure it's the farmer's fault. I wanted to go into the forest myself, but I'm scared. I don't know the roads, so I might get lost." The gamekeeper shook his head and said, "You're right. Troy couldn't have left. He loved our small town very much. Come with me to one place for a walk. There's an old house in the forest where I sometimes spend the night when I feed the animals. Not many people know about it, but you can live there for a while. There are matches, biscuits, canned food, and even a spring with drinking water nearby. If Troy is alive, he can only be there. Otherwise, the beasts would have killed him long ago." The gamekeeper took his gun, a backpack with supplies, and they set off. Alicia lagged behind the man. Her legs were sore from fatigue, and branches scratched her hands, but she didn't complain and tried to keep up with the grim elderly Ron, because she had a goal: to find Troy. The gamekeeper was right. Troy was in that old house. Looking at him, she was frightened. His whole body was bruised, swollen, and covered in bites, and his leg was severely swollen. Troy was surprised to see the guests and said, "Ron, how did you guess I'm alive? That I'm in the forest? And you, Alicia, I definitely didn't expect to see you here. Keep in mind, I won't return to the small town until I've taken revenge on this farmer." Troy continued, "It wasn't me. It was Alicia who begged me to find you. She figured out on her own that it was you damaging the farmer's equipment, and you certainly put on quite a show. The locals are now afraid to leave their homes in the evenings, thinking it's the ghost doing it all. Don't do anything stupid, Troy. Come home with us. You've already avenged the farmer enough. Otherwise, you might end up in jail," the gamekeeper said. The guy got nervous and exclaimed loudly, "Do you even know, Ron, that this farmer and his men beat me almost to death and buried me alive, thinking I was dead? I don't even know how I survived and got out of that pit. And if I go back, what will change? He won't leave me alone, and not just me. He'll torment Alicia too, because she helped me and invited the journalists. No, I'll seek revenge on him as long as I'm alive." At this point, Alicia couldn't hold back and began to plead with the guy. "Troy, think about what you're doing. This isn't right. How long can you stay here? Look how swollen your leg is. What if it gets infected? And if you die here, who will benefit? We need to go to the police and invite the journalists again because the farmer wanted to kill you. And that's already a crime. He's not just a developer. He's only a middleman, and we need to find the people who ordered all this. Let's go home together. I'm begging you. You need to go to the hospital." The guy shook his head in disagreement, and then Alicia shouted, "Is that how it is? Fine. Let's go home, Ron. Let him sit here if he doesn't understand anything. I cry every day worrying about him, constantly searching with men around the area. But he doesn't care about me and Zachary. Then we'll leave this small town. And he even told me he wants a family." Ron chuckled, and Troy hopped on one leg, grabbed Alicia's hands, and looked at her intently. "Did you really worry about me? Does that mean you love me? I've been in love with you for a long time, but I was always afraid to say it. I agree, I'll go with you." They took a very long time to get back home and returned to the small town when it was already dark outside. But as soon as mobile reception was available, Alicia immediately called the police and summoned an ambulance. The guy was urgently hospitalized as he needed treatment, and at the hospital, the police officers documented his injuries and the investigator took his testimony. Alicia confirmed that the farmer had publicly threatened to do everything possible to prevent him from interfering with the land acquisition. The press and television aided the investigation, and soon something interesting came to light. Alicia was shocked to learn that the very developer behind it was her ex-husband. It turned out that he illegally wanted to acquire these protected lands and pocket the money. In reality, there were no apartments for the local residents. He was simply planning to deceive people. Harvey could now face a long prison sentence. The local residents despised the farmer. He always underpaid the workers for their labor and made them work from early morning till late at night. Therefore, he had to urgently leave the small town, especially since he had been experiencing losses on his farm recently. Troy soon recovered from the hospital and returned to the small town. He now never left Alicia's side, and she stopped hiding her feelings for him. Soon, they got married, and Troy adopted Zachary, and now the boy had his surname. The woman sold her late father's house in town, and with the money, she helped Troy fulfill his dream. Troy had long told Alicia that he dreamed of opening his own bakery in the small town. After all, people had a lot of grain, and bread was not regularly brought to the stores, so having a bakery would ensure fresh bread for the locals and profit for himself. Alicia immediately noticed Troy's talent when they started living in his house. Everything there was handmade, so she had no doubt that Troy would succeed and decided to help him with purchasing equipment. She was knowledgeable about it. It took them almost a year to build the bakery and launch production because they needed to plan everything meticulously, gather documents, and obtain permits from various authorities. Finally, the business started to make a profit. Troy didn't sell his products for high prices, so from early morning, there was always a line at his bakery for delicious, crispy bread. Alicia was amazed at Troy's dedication to the business. It seemed like he could work around the clock. She managed to help him, and also dealt with matters at the clinic, where she even managed to purchase medical supplies and necessary equipment for their medical office at a good price. The locals no longer talked about their age difference, and everyone respected this couple and was grateful to them for contributing to the development of their hometown. Alicia didn't regret listening to Aaron back then and taking the risk of moving here. Now, she wouldn't agree to live in a big city again for anything. She had grown fond of this place. It felt and breathed differently now. Alicia constantly admired the picturesque landscape around her, green meadows, a river with gurgling water, and the scent of herbs. Where else could you find this in the city? And how cozy and warm it was to have dinner together in the kitchen on winter evenings. Sometimes it seemed like Aaron had gotten a bit younger. She was now calm about her grandson's future, knowing he had loving parents, and the boy had already started first grade. The grandmother was constantly knitting long scarves and socks, smiling and whispering something quietly. Zachary had long called Alicia his mom, and Troy his dad. He had decided so himself, although his parents didn't lie to him about being their biological son and told him the truth from the very beginning. After all, it's hard to hide such a secret in a small town. The boy loved his mom very much, hugged her, listened to her, and always helped his dad. But he knew where his biological mom, who gave birth to him, was buried in the cemetery, and together with his parents, he always took care of her grave. But one day, an event occurred that frightened Troy's whole family. At that time, Troy was grinding flour, while Alicia was kneading dough for bread, and Zachary was feeding the animals in the yard with his grandmother, when suddenly there was a loud knock on their gate. Alicia stepped out onto the porch and was surprised to see Harvey there. He was unrecognizable, having gained a lot of weight, looking very unkempt, and with swollen eyes. "Harvey, why did you come here? How did you even find out where I live?" exclaimed the woman. "The whole story with the farmer changed my whole life. Because of that, I served time in prison and lost my business. I recently got out of prison and want to see my biological son, Zachary. Come here. I've come for you. I'm your dad, your real dad," the man said angrily. The boy got scared and ran to Troy, crying and shouting, "Dad, some angry man came and says he'll take me away, and that he's my dad." Troy clenched his fists, hugged Zachary, and said, "Don't cry, son, and don't be afraid. Stay here for a bit. I'll come back soon." Meanwhile, Alicia tried to have a reasonable conversation with her ex-husband. "Harvey, why do you need Zachary? You rejected him even before he was born. Leave. Don't scare the child. Don't ruin his life." But Harvey didn't calm down and started shouting even louder. "He's my son, and I have the right to see him. I'll take him away from you." He looked at Alicia's protruding belly under her sundress and said, "I see you're already pregnant. Have you started liking younger guys? Isn't it ridiculous? Why do you need another boy? You'll have your own child soon, and I don't have anyone besides Zachary. You didn't want to have children with me." Alicia felt hurt. She wanted to say everything she had on her mind, but then Troy pushed her aside and whispered in her ear, "Darling, take Zachary and go inside. I'll come soon. Don't worry. You can't afford to get nervous right now." Alicia listened to her husband, took the child inside, but she was deeply concerned, so she stood in the hallway, listening to what was happening beyond the gate. Troy grabbed Harvey by the collar and shouted, "Listen to me carefully. Forget about coming here ever again. This is my family, my beloved wife, and my son legally. To you, Zachary is nobody. So leave us alone, or I'll hit you so hard that doctors in the ICU won't be able to help you. Remember, you're very foolish if you could lose such a wonderful woman like Alicia. I love her more than life itself, and won't let anyone hurt her. And Zachary is my son. Do you understand?" Humiliated and ashamed, Harvey left their home. He was now unwanted by anyone because the man had ruined everything himself. Even though he used to have everything, now he was a lonely and poor man who had served time in prison. Harvey was deeply resentful towards Alicia, saying, "She did it on purpose. She purposely adopted my biological son to hurt me. And the boy is scared of his real father and considers Troy his dad. I'm sure Bruce cursed me before his death." He bought 2 bottles of alcohol from the store and went to the train station, where he drank straight from the bottle. Then he got lost on the road, wandered into the forest, and no one ever saw him again. Local residents said he drowned in the river. Unfortunately, Harvey never realized that he was to blame for what happened in his life. Alicia's pregnancy was challenging. Doctors warned her about her advanced age, but she didn't give up. She fought against severe leg swelling and morning sickness. Troy took constant care of her, forbidding her from lifting heavy objects and protecting her, while Aaron provided her with special herbs. At the right time, Alicia gave birth to a daughter, Stella. Joyful, Troy fetched her from the maternity hospital with a huge bouquet of flowers and helium balloons. At Alicia's home, there was another surprise waiting in the backyard. A large round tent was set up with a long table and benches where all the local residents gathered to celebrate the birth of the baby. They congratulated Alicia, took the little girl in their arms, and wished her well-being. "Alicia, if only you knew how grateful I am to the Lord that your car broke down near our little town, and that Troy brought you specifically to my house. You saved us along with your granddaughter. Every evening, I pray for your health and ask the Lord only for happiness for you. You deserve it. I feel so good with you, as if we were real relatives. Live harmoniously with Troy, love my Zachary, and raise my granddaughter," Aaron said. After these words, all the guests raised their glasses and some even shed tears. Alicia hugged Aaron tightly, because she had indeed become like family to her. Troy also decided to make a toast. Let's drink to Stella, the new resident of our little town, and my daughter. Alicia, thank you for giving birth to our daughter, Zachary, and I will cherish and spoil her, right, son? And to all of you kind people, I also want to say thank you for always helping us. We are all one big happy family here. After that, everyone continued to celebrate the birth of the girl, socialize, and dance. Alicia held her daughter in her arms, admired her chubby cheeks, and thought, I feel so good right now. Perhaps I had to go through all my troubles to find such happiness. If someone had told me earlier that I, the daughter of a bank director, would suddenly fall in love with a small town and want to live here forever, I wouldn't have believed it. I don't care what they say about me in the clinic, and our age difference with Troy doesn't matter at all. My dad always said to trust my feelings, and right now I feel calm and happy, so I must have done everything right.